For the next item, the board will receive an update on the long-awaited 2020-2021 Instructional Plan. And Dr. Grant, our Chief of School Leadership, is going to kick us off for that. But before she does that, I want to acknowledge so many who are here in this room today. And you see a group of folks in front of you, all of whom have had their fingerprints on this in many, many ways and for quite a long time. We have some building leaders who have joined us for the presentation to represent their colleagues at both the elementary, middle, and high school level of our principals. And I think Mrs. Kinsella used the word Herculean at our last board meeting, and it really stuck with me, and especially as I've watched this work unfold, not just since the emergency closure in March, but particularly the work to formulate a firm plan for our virtual learning first 9 weeks. It has been a Herculean task, and this team and the number of team members not present here today behind these folks have just been working so hard, so creatively to almost build the plane while we're flying. This is truly an unprecedented, unusual start to the year, but we are approaching it with the same kind of enthusiasm and excitement we would any year despite the heavy lift. But I'm so proud of this team and just want to acknowledge their tremendous work, and a huge thanks to everyone here today. Thank you. So without further ado, Dr. Grant, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Dr. Cashwell, and good afternoon, Chairman Cooper, members of the board, and the audience here in person and watching online. My name is Ingrid Grant, and I am the Chief of School Leadership for Henrico County Public Schools. Joining me this afternoon from the Division Leadership Team, Dr. Leslie Hughes, Chief of Learning. Directors from the Division of School Leadership, Learning, Operations, and the Department of Family and Community Engagement. Scott Thorpe, Director of Elementary Education. Mac Baton, Director of Workforce and Career Development. Michael DeSalt, Director of Teaching, Learning, and Innovation. And Dr. Tracy Weston, Director of Professional Learning and Leadership. Katie Smith, Assistant Director of Exceptional Education. Jim Ellis, Director of Transportation. Brian Maddox, Director of Technology. Adrian Cole, Director of Family and Community Engagement. And also joining us are school principals. Joy Reed, Principal of Ratcliffe Elementary, Thomas McCauley, Principal of Pocahontas Middle School, and Dr. Michael Jackson, Principal of Hermitage High School. Together, we will present the board with an overview of the Henrico County Public Schools 2021 Learning Plan. Here's the agenda for today's presentation. We have principals joining us to showcase their back-to-school activities. Schedules have been enhanced, and attendance guidelines have been updated to meet the developmental needs of our students. We will provide you with a detailed overview of virtual learning to include a video. We also provided professional learning for teacher leaders, coaches, specialists, and administrators to build their capacity in the virtual setting. In addition, we will discuss how we identify learning gaps and instructional needs to meet the social, emotional, and academic needs of our students to include limited in-person learning for select groups of students. And most importantly, discussing how we can leverage transportation, technology, and community and family engagement to support our families in a predominantly virtual environment. Just as a reminder, from the last meeting on July 23rd, the board approved a predominantly virtual option with limited in-person learning. Here we have a continuum of how we envision taking a measured, strategic approach to returning to full in-person instruction, moving from predominantly virtual learning with limited in-person opportunities for select groups to larger groups of students back in our classrooms. This gradual, measured approach will allow us to respond to what is a dynamic and fluid situation. We plan to start the year in approach 2, where most students are learning predominantly virtually with in-person learning on a limited basis for select individuals or groups of students. During phase 2, students and teachers are engaged in 5 days per week of virtual instruction. Teachers would have the opportunity and flexibility to work from home or in their classrooms. Please remember, schools and offices will follow health and safety protocols in all approaches. and teachers are expected to teach 5 days a week throughout the Continuum. As Henrico County Public Schools is reopening, we are thrilled to welcome our students back to school and kick off the 2021 school year. Schools have planned open house activities to welcome our new kindergarten and new students to HCPS. Secondary schools have planned transition activities for their 6th and 9th grade students. And we also have planned special activities for our seniors to kick off their last year of high school. Today, we have with us Joy Reed, principal of Ratcliffe Elementary, Thomas McCauley, principal of Pocahontas Middle, and Dr. Michael Jackson, principal of Hermitage High, will share their back-to-school activities and kickoff to start the year. Principals have been collaborating with their colleagues, so other schools will have similar activities tailored to their school communities. There is a common thread on each level, and the Division of School Leadership will create a calendar with all back-to-school events.
Good afternoon, Dr. Cashwell and members of the board. I am excited to share with you our Ratcliffe's Return to Learn plan. Steve Costantino recommends that as we enter this season of virtual learning, we should collaborate with families in our efforts to serve them. With that in mind, we are offering various opportunities to collaborate with families as they return to school. Kindergarten families and new students will have the opportunity to schedule individual one-on-one virtual appointments with teachers. Parents and students enjoyed the drive-through celebrations in the spring. We want to recreate that experience again to kick off the 2021 school year. This is an exciting and engaging event to celebrate this extraordinary year with a positive mindset. Students will be able to greet their teachers and staff in a safe environment. During this celebration, we are providing students with learning kits and mindfulness kits. Our learning kits contain books, whiteboards, sticky notes, glue sticks, pencils, crayons, and manipulatives. As an REB award winner, we were planning to create a student Zen Den within our school to allow students the opportunity to practice mindfulness strategies. Instead, we will pivot and create a virtual Zen Den, which has videos for teachers and students to use to learn mindfulness strategies, resources for parents, and virtual books for students. In addition, each student will receive a mindfulness kit that contains a slinky, fidget toy, putty, stress ball, and bubbles, along with mindfulness strategies. During the Driveby Celebration, teachers will greet students and distribute their learning and mindfulness kits. The week of August 30th, teachers will send personalized videos to families and schedule one-on-one virtual conferences with families to share more information about their class. I am very excited and look forward to new learning experiences for my students, families, and staff. Thank you.
Dr. Cashwell, members of the board, thank you so much for providing me an opportunity to share what I and many of my colleagues have been working on. The work of creating innovative ways to immediately connect our rising 6th grade students to middle school. This is important work, and I am excited by the product the Pocahontas faculty and staff have created for our students and families. As we explore the slide projected, I would like to bring your attention to the Preparing for Success section. It is extremely important our families are confident their children will have a positive experience, confidence our families will have a positive experience, and confidence the lessons will be engaging, rigorous, and frustration-free. This will be accomplished through clear communication and providing the right tools for each family to be successful. Tools such as tutorials into our learning platforms and having as many questions as possible answered prior to the start of the year. It will be important families know what to expect and how to navigate this new virtual world. Lowering anxiety while raising confidence is the mission of our Hawk Hill camp. And I know we will be successful in meeting the goals of this mission. To connect our faculty and staff to our students and families, we have created an evening in which we will answer the most common questions. In addition, visitors to our page will take a virtual tour of Pocahontas, showcasing all the magic which lies in wait for our 6th graders. The gym, our Makerspace Innovation Zone, our school wings, our lockers, and of course, the impressive auditorium. We also have created an interactive map. This map will enable families to peer into each classroom, each office, each learning space, and each visitor will be provided an introduction and welcome by the teacher or staff person of that space. And please note, any reference to in-person experiences, when they do occur, will do so with strict adherence to CDC and social distancing guidelines. I'd like to take a moment now to show you the interactive map at this time. We will first visit our elective wing in room 1507.
French teacher at Pocahontas Middle School. I teach 6th grade exploratory and cultures. I teach 7th grade French 1A, and I teach 8th grade French 1B. And this is my little dog, Kipper. This is going to be a great year. I think it's going to be exciting, and I can't wait to meet you guys. I hope you have a great year. I'll see you soon. Bye.
We'll now travel upstairs virtually to room 2706.
Hi there. Welcome to room 2706. I'm Mrs. Deegan and I teach reading. At Pocahontas, my classroom's upstairs because I also teach 7th grade English. One of my very favorite quotes about reading is especially appropriate this year. It's that reading gives you someplace to go when you have to stay where you are. And hopefully we'll learn lots of learning adventures together this year. I can't wait to meet you, and we're going to have a lot of fun learning, sharing, becoming better people, and hopefully laughing a lot along the way. Thank you.
And Ms. Deegan summed it up very well. This year we are going to be learning, sharing, becoming better people, and laughing a lot along the way. On behalf of my colleagues, who all have amazing plans in place, I want to thank you for the opportunity to showcase how middle schools will immediately connect and excite our students throughout the county. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Cooper, members of the board, Dr. Cashwell. We have an incredible group of high school principals who have worked nonstop this summer preparing for the start of the 2021 school year. Communication and engagement will be paramount as we transition to this new form of virtual instruction and learning. This visual represents a sample flyer for either a back-to-school kickoff and/or freshman orientation. It is our goal to create graphics that are easily accessible via smartphone so that stakeholders can obtain instant access. By implementing the use of Google Links and QR codes, students and families can quickly receive information about upcoming events. In the event we need to distribute items to families, we will operate via a drive-through format following all CDC safety guidelines. The next table offers a more detailed view of back-to-school events during the first 9 weeks. All high schools will maintain their original programming, but alter each event to be held virtually. Community forums will take place during this month to ensure all stakeholders have appropriate information in preparation for the school year. Administrative teams can use these forums to set direction and provide clarity on specifics to the community. Seniors will have an opportunity to take individual pictures by appointment following all CDC guidelines. Unfortunately, Strawbridge Studios will not provide a drape or tuxedo for students to use as normal. To ensure all HCPS seniors have an equitable photo experience, an additional appointment with Strawbridge will be scheduled in the fall for seniors to take a picture wearing a cap and gown for the yearbook. Beginning the first week of September, we welcome the class of 2024 onto campus virtually for freshman orientation. This is a major event where we build momentum for the start of the school year. As students return to school on September 8th, we will hold class meetings to review learning expectations, graduation requirements, avenues for student voice, and discuss ways to virtually engage in the high school experience. Back to school night will also be held in September in a virtual setting where we invite parents to learn the mission and vision, goals for the school year, join the PTA or PTSO, follow their student schedule, and meet teachers. Lastly, convocation will occur in October as we officially declare the class of 2021 seniors. This will be a virtual event similar to the ceremonies held this past June. It continues to be our goal to ensure that all students have the best high school experience under the given circumstance. And finally, for Panther Nation listening, roll Pride.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. As we prepare for back to school, the division is hard at work creating a supportive resources for all stakeholders. You see here, and you have at your desk, the Learning Plan Handbook for students and families to assist our school community in navigating and preparing for upcoming school year. You have a copy in front of you, and we will have a digital version available for the public. The handbook includes information on new learning for instruction, student support resources, information on limited in-person instruction, and digital resources, just to name a few valuable resources to support our families and community. We also have resources created in progress, including a virtual meeting tips for students and digital learning resource webpage for families. Virtual classroom tips for students is a quick reference tip sheet for before, during, and after virtual classroom tool to assist students in preparing for the upcoming school year and virtual day. Families are encouraged to keep this tool handy for the first few days of school and beyond to assist their children with virtual learning. Digital learning information for families. We have a separate version for elementary, middle, and high school. Everything our families need to know to understand the digital learning landscape their children are entering. That is why we have a digital learning information webpage for our families at each level that provides information and links for all the key digital resources in Henrico County. Now let us take a look at our enhanced elementary and secondary schedules. Today we have with us Scott Thorpe, Director of Elementary Education, and Mac Baton, Director of Workforce and Career Development.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Grant. Elementary schools have created developmentally appropriate schedules for each grade level that mirror a traditional in-person daily routine. Here we have sample virtual student schedules for grades kindergarten through grade 2 and also grades 3 through 5. Elementary schools have created their own virtual class schedules and have worked to ensure consistency in virtual schedules across the grade level in their schools. The schedules developed by each school are mindful of students' developmental needs and strike a balance of whole group learning, small group learning, independent learning, and opportunities for movement or breaks. Just as the regular classroom day, teachers will not deliver whole group instruction all day. The virtual instructional day will include the use of a variety of adaptive, developmentally appropriate software programs for independent practice when teachers are providing students with small group instruction. Now let's take a look at a schedule for predominantly virtual learning at the middle school level.
Good afternoon. Let's take a look at the middle and high school schedules. Here we have a middle school schedule. Students would receive a combination of live synchronous and asynchronous learning using Schoology during the instructional periods. Microsoft Teams, the county's virtual conferencing platform, would be utilized to engage students through small group instruction, discussion groups, and asynchronous learning. Building administrators will be responsible for constructing a master schedule that meets the needs of their students. Individual teachers will maintain consistent amount of time in each content area, but instructional delivery will differ by class. Teachers will also follow best practices in online design and delivery of instruction as provided in the Online Educator's Guide, My Schoology Part 1, My Schoology Part 2, the Online Educators Workshop, and the content-specific best practices as shared by their instructional specialists. This slide shows a sample schedule for middle schools. Classes would run for 75 minutes to include a 30-minute advisory block and 10-minute transitions. The advisory block would consist of social emotional learning lessons, intervention, and enrichment opportunities. There is a 30-minute lunch break for all students. We also have included an extended service period for academic support, time for case managers to check in on special education students, etc. As you can see, the high school schedule mirrors that of the middle school. Students will receive a combination of live synchronous and asynchronous learning used in Schoology during the instructional periods and Microsoft Teams to engage students through small group instruction, discussion groups, and asynchronous learning. This slide shows a sample schedule for high schools. Classes will run for 90 minutes with the exception of first period, which runs for 60 minutes and meets daily, and early bird classes, which run for 55 minutes. The high school schedule also includes a 25-minute extended learning time, which will be used for advisory, academic support, social and emotional learning lessons, extracurricular meetings, and time for case managers to meet with special education students. In addition, students will have a 30-minute lunch break and 10 minutes between classes for a snack, stretching, and to use the restroom. Teachers will have the flexibility to adjust their synchronous learning based on the previously taught material. Now that students have their schedules, what are the expectations for attendance? The Code of Virginia requires compulsory attendance for students in grades K through 12. Attendance will be taken in the virtual environment. In accordance with the Virginia Department of Education's guidance for tracking students' attendance in a variety of settings, including virtual and distance format, meaningful interaction and contact between the student and teachers is imperative for student success in learning. Therefore, students will be counted present if they fulfill the definition of meaningful interaction and/or contact. For courses, teachers will make it clear to students their expectations for attendance in the virtual setting, as well as the expectations for assignment completion and deadlines. When a student is unable to attend a class or meet the assignment deadlines, parents or guardians should notify the teachers, the school counselor, and/or the school. At this time, we'll take a small pause to ask for questions on back-to-school activities, enhanced schedules, and the attendance from the board.
Okay, let's start to my right. Ms. Kinsella, any questions so far?
I was going to ask a question. What is the plan at any level for the students, especially elementary, but really any level, if our students don't attend the back-to-school supply collection, for example, in the bus loops, how do we plan on getting supplies to our students they may need?
Good afternoon again. Thank you for the question. Our individual schools have many outreach efforts to try to get school supplies to our children, and we have incorporated our transportation department to help out with that. We'd be happy to get you together some information regarding those efforts.
And then have we considered bringing back, this might be a Dr. Cashwell question, have we considered bringing back our family advocates before August 24th to help out in our Title I schools?
I know that a number of staff, both at the school level and through our family and community engagement, folks have been looking at ways to make sure that needs are met. And so some of that's been done through volunteering or flexing time as appropriate. But certainly, we're going to want to make sure that we have all the staff on hand that we need to. And so if we need to adjust those schedules, we'd be able to do so if employees are willing.
And then in looking at some of the back-to-school supply lists for a normal year, what would we say are the probably top 5 items students need outside of headphones?
Good afternoon again. Headphones are definitely a must. I would say we collected a list from our teachers and students who participated in our summer virtual learning programming, and headphones and whiteboards and dry erase markers were at the very, very top of the list.
And I would note that our family and community engagement efforts on the supply drives have really focused on those particular items. And so we'll be able to fill in gaps as needed across our schools to make sure that every student has what they need. I know at the elementary level also, when it comes to, and I know Mrs. Reed alluded to this, the kits that may have books or math manipulatives or some of those hands-on materials, teachers will be able to kind of forecast what their lessons will be over those first few weeks and package materials appropriately that may be picked up in a drive-through style or taken by our transportation folks right out into the community.
Okay, and then I had a few scheduling, two more questions just about back to school. I know that outside groups won't be able to use our buildings while they're closed, but what about our outdoor recreational space during the first night online?
That's a good question, and Mr. Pritchard may have some information related to that. And I know some of that outdoor space is used particularly by the city or the county recs and parks, and they also, that property is open to them for their use. But Mr. Pritchard, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, at this current time, because of some of our outside groups such as recs and parks and stuff like that, and we've opened our outside facilities to the communities as well, so they are available.
Okay, they will be.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, we would still go through a process if somebody wants to use it, like an outside group, then we would have to get that checked on and make sure that there's no conflict or anything like that, but yes.
Okay, I've had some inquiries.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we move on to scheduling. When the students are logged in during independent time, or are they logged out after the class instruction, how does that work? Are they expected to be logged in the whole time?
They'll be looking from direction for their teacher, from their teacher. So teachers may have set up the class period, and I think this is particularly relevant at the secondary level where they're going through their bell schedule. A teacher may, be doing a majority of whole group instruction one day, small group instruction. Some days may be dedicated solely to independent tasks that they would be required to submit, and that goes to that meaningful contact or teachers looking to see submission and being counted present that day. It may not require logging in during that class period. But I think they'll need to make sure that they're in sync with the expectations of each teacher of the course to make sure that they know what's expected of them each day. But by and large, the expectation, particularly for those first weeks, is following their schedule, logging on at the assigned time, and I think they'll begin to understand each teacher's rhythm of how that class period will be divided up.
Okay. And then in looking at the scheduling and knowing that we still have the grab-and-go lunches, how will that work for the students?
Mr. Sorensen, do you want to speak to school nutrition and how that will work?
We're coordinating those schedules now, so we plan to have grab-and-go or curbside meals at each school, and then we'll also have delivery work and transportation, work out delivery routes. We don't have all the times nailed down yet, but we'll coordinate with instruction to make sure all that works with the student schedule.
Yeah, and I think as we've done in the past, there may be the ability to pick up for multiple days.
Correct.
So you wouldn't necessarily be visiting every day during lunchtime. The times would probably coincide perhaps after the school day ends where you're picking up for the next day rather than disrupting your schedule during the middle of the instructional
Correct.
day.
There are different options that we're looking at. So some of the students will come back on Tuesdays and Thursdays to
Right.
deliver multiple days on Mondays and Wednesdays. So we're working through all those options now.
I was just wondering what kind of flexibility, because the current schedule doesn't seem to allow much for,
That's right, the
how
grab
they
and
would have to
go.
be logged in.
The grab-and-go procedures will be altered to match the needs of the first quarter, and recognizing meal service may even have an uptick on that for students who may not necessarily qualify for the free or reduced lunch, but may want to purchase breakfast or lunch as they would have during the school day. And so we'll work through those details and look forward to communicating those.
And then last question, we continue to say these times aren't normal, and a response to some feedback from constituents, and as a parent myself, having sat here in meetings virtually with the board and in person for 6.5 hours, when I look at the secondary school day, I ask myself, is there any flexibility there? I mean, Dr. Cashwell, do we have any flexibility to shorten the day? That's a long day, 5 days a week for our students.
Yeah, well, certainly, and I see Dr. Jackson stepping up, and I'll let him tackle this as well from a secondary perspective. But I know the initial thought in the schedules, we certainly have requirements we need to meet for each course. And so while there may be some opportunity to adjust those schedules, we'll want to hear from our teachers and our students, certainly once we begin this virtual format. And so while we've given individual schools and teachers flexibility, I mean, what you see is a sample schedule. Certainly the idea was that they would attend each course on those given days. But Dr. Jackson, do you want to speak a bit to the secondary?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And teachers had a flexibility within those 90-minute blocks or 60-minute blocks, so that's repeating every day, to alter their schedule. So students will not necessarily have to be face-to-face in front of a screen for the entire block.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think to your point, which is an excellent one, we'll want to hear from our students and our teachers once we get rolling and see how it's working. And if there are ways we can alter some of our central guidance, then we'll certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsella. Ms. Ogburn.
Thank you. Just two quick things. I love the idea of the Drive-By Celebration at Radcliffe, and I'm hoping we'll see that replicated at other places. It seems to me it's kind of the best of both worlds. We have an opportunity for keeping everybody happy and safe and all of that, but also build some excitement around what is obviously not the time that we're all enjoying. And, you know, obviously we would prefer things to be a different way, but at least we can get students excited about the beginning of the year. But I just really like the idea of the drive-by way of doing that, and I'm hoping we'll see that. Secondly is the supply drive question. I'm a member of a teacher group, and one of the things that we have talked about is how can we do what we normally do, which is collect school supplies. So are we even accepting outside school supplies from people that are, or groups that are wanting to donate? Because obviously you've got to worry about how we accept those under these
Family and community engagement is set up with a structure for receiving those donations centrally, and then they'll work on a plan to disseminating to schools as are needed. And I see Adrienne making her way.
Yeah, Adrienne,
if she wants to provide some details. I know we've put out some social media word on this as well, because we've had some great interest from the community, so it's a great question. I would love to share those details publicly.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. So yes, we are receiving additional supports from community, and we've gotten a wealth of resources in already. We're accepting those items Tuesdays and Thursdays here at Newbridge from 9 to 12. And at this point, we've already had 2 pop-up supply drives as well, one in further West End and also here in the East End.
So would we be accepting things from individuals who want to donate as well as organizations?
Absolutely.
Now, are those items, and I've been asked this, are we quarantining them for a while before distribution, and how is that part being handled?
Yes, absolutely. And so what we're looking to do, and you heard a little bit earlier, some of the learning kits and these family engagement packets that we'll be getting to schools. A lot of schools have partners who are working directly with them, but we also are looking to supplement with some of the items that we're getting in.
But once they're taken in, they're being properly handled and held, et cetera, before they're, okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ogburn. Ms. Shea?
Excuse me.
Hold on. Yes, Ms. Reed?
I just wanted to add that through our donations outside of, we have a agency that's donating to us, I recommended that we do it through Amazon Wishlist, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to share that. And
that's awesome.
the reason for that was it only had minimal contact, was my thinking, and it was delivered to the school directly from the wish list, and they also could opt to purchase other things, maybe at a lesser price or similar cost, but in general, they can see the need that we had, particularly the dry erase boards, dry erase markers, and they could catch a sale through Amazon and buy in bulk. And then that was sent to the school, and I did, matter of fact, let it sit for quite a few days before even touching it.
That's great. So the schools that this teacher group supports, they could look and see if there is a wish list. And okay, that's
Correct.
great to know. Thank you
I just
so
wanted to
much.
make sure. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Reed, Ms. Osborne, Ms. Shea.
Thank you. So I have a handful of questions. My first one might be jumping the gun a little bit, Dr. Cashwell, so feel free to let me know if it's later in the presentation. I just didn't see it when I scanned. So currently we are in approach number 2 on our sinusoidal wave to reentry. Where are we on developing specific metrics to move to approach 3 and approach 4?
Yeah, and actually, it's a great question at any time in the presentation, because that's not something we've covered in detail here with the learning plan. But as we mentioned when I made the recommendation and the board voted to accept the predominantly virtual approach, that we would be working with our SHAB in conjunction with other health professionals to bring some proposed metrics to the board, recognizing that there probably isn't one that's going to provide us all the answers, but some recommendations on what that might look like. And Dr. Tigan can update us on where we are, and we look forward to bringing that information to the next school board meeting.
Yes, Robin Gilbert, our supervisor for school health services, has put together a work group that will meet matter of fact, they have a meeting next week, and out of that, we expect to bring some recommendations to the board at the second meeting in August 27th.
And the plan would be to then revisit the progress on those metrics, once we hear from the board whether those are the right things you'd like us to be focusing on. We'll be providing updates on where we are with those metrics at each of our school board meetings. You'll receive an update.
Exactly, and Dr. Avula is currently our chair of SHAB, and he has, even in these times, we're slightly concerned whether he had the time to allocate to Henrico and to our work, and he said absolutely he does.
So in 2 weeks, we can expect to have those metrics, those preliminary
That
metrics.
is our plan, yes, ma'am.
All right, fantastic, thank you. Because I think it's, even with all the uncertainty that we don't know where the trends are going, the data's going, we all know that our ultimate goal is to get our kids back in school and be looking at how close are we to moving towards that, and how, as a community, can we move closer to that as we go?
Absolutely, and I would add that we didn't want to be premature in bringing those, though, because there are some new dashboard data points that were just recently released to the health departments for their consideration with this kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we consider that new information and make sure that we incorporate that into what we bring back.
And Dr. Cashwell, you've been on some of those calls with the health department, keeping up to date with their latest, even internal recommendations.
That's right, yes.
Thank you. All right, now to the questions that really pertain to what are on the slide. Thank you for that. So our back to school activities, I've gotten some feedback from some of the community that their schools are planning like outdoor gatherings with popsicles and that sort of thing. And I haven't gotten those emails as a parent, but I don't know if some schools are doing that. And I just think we need to be really careful in our planning that we're not inadvertently gathering groups of students, even if it's outside, especially if they're going to be like unmasking themselves to eat something.
No, absolutely, and that's good feedback. Our school level directors are working with their principals to look at their back to school plans and provide guidance on that. And certainly, as we will remind our leaders that are and those planning events, that our health mitigation plan now in print and will be posted has to be followed at all times. And so while there are some opportunities where students may be in our buildings, which we've mentioned for limited in person, or there may be other reasons students or families visit our offices, that we're doing so in a manner that maintains distancing, face coverings, and all of the required protocols. And that also includes tracking who's been where at what events or because of contact tracing. Dr. Grant?
In each level, they were giving guidance, transition guidance on activities and protocols to follow, elementary, middle, and high. So our principals already have all the guidelines for all of our back-to-school activities.
Thank you. Turning to schedules, I just want to reiterate, which all of our presenters did and Dr. Cashwell, but these are sample schedules for our public. And so am I correct in our building principals have the responsibility for the exact master schedule in their school, but that master schedule will fall within the same start and end times that the county has proposed?
That's right, and the recommended balance. And I see Mr. Thorpe coming forward who can add to that, but that's correct.
Yes, absolutely. As directors in the Department of School Leadership, we have worked very closely with the principals and monitored their schedules and checked over their schedules prior to their release today.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Thorpe. Has there been any consideration for a countywide common lunch for our families?
I'll speak to that. So I don't see anybody stepping up to the plate here, but certainly there. Oh, her question was related to a common lunch, where the schedules for elementary and middle and high school don't necessarily have lunchtime coinciding at the same time. And I think because of the reason you just mentioned with individual building principals being able to sort of look at that master schedule and knowing how their resources for art and music and PE pan out and how those schedules look, to make a commitment to a countywide lunchtime would be limiting to our building principals as they create their schedules. But as we've said, flexibility is going to be the key in everything that we're doing. And while we've told families and students if they're not able to log on at a particular time because of family need, a child care need, older sibling working with the younger sibling, there is flexibility there. And so if there was some sort of hardship related to that lunch hour, I would just encourage families to know that students should feel free communicating with their teachers and their school staff regarding what that might be.
Thank you. I'll speak more into the mic this time, Dr. Grant. Thanks. So when I looked at the sample high school schedule, and I understand this is a sample, but it has an extended learning block there right around lunchtime. Can you explain to me a little bit of what that really is? And I know for some of our schools, the teachers are being requested to have office hours after the conclusion of the day. And is there any reason why those office hours are not coinciding with the extended learning period?
Yes, the extended learning period is a time during the school day where this year we were going to infuse social emotional learning. Students have some traumatic experience being out of school for such a long time, so we have to, at the high school level, we're going to infuse that this year. We also can incorporate goal setting and different class meetings at that particular time. So that's the same time that has always been in the high school schedule.
Thank you so much. And then when we also look at our secondary schedule, both for middle school and high school, I know we're on the block schedule. So some days for middle school will be 1 through 4 and others will be 5 through 8. And similarly, but a little different for high school. So are we looking at the A-B schedule like we usually have in the building? Or are we looking at a little bit more of a creative approach with grouping days so that our students and our teachers in this virtual platform could kind of more focus in on a smaller number of classes at a time? I'm not talking all like full 4x4, but maybe an alternating week or, front of the week, back of the week. Are we just in purely alternating days?
Yes, right now it's an alternating day, our traditional bell schedule.
Okay, thank you. That is all I have for this block. Ms. Atkins, thank you.
So Dr. Grant and team, thank you. Extraordinary work. Extraordinary work during an extraordinary time, right? And so I first wanted to start with gratitude, and I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of people that have grace for you. So I wanted to start with that. So my first questions revolve around nutrition. I know that I looked through the book and it shared that you can pay for your meals in advance like you always could in the past, as well as paying for cash. Because it's curbside, do we have any concerns with allowing folks to pay for cash at the curb? One. And then two, are students able to use debit cards when they come to pick their meals up? And let me give you some background. A couple students asked me about possibly using debit cards to pay for meals at the curb, and then shared for those that will be driving to pick up their lunches. Do we have any guidance that we want to give our students that are able to drive, that plan to drive to pick their lunches up?
Right, so we are encouraging folks to pay their accounts up front. We are able to take cash. We wouldn't want to, but certainly to accommodate our families, if we need to, we can take cash. But we are encouraging folks to pay their account in advance. It's actually a great question about the debit card. I'll have to look into that. Of course, we do take credit cards online, so I'll look into the availability of a debit card. But that's something that we already do online for families to pay in advance. I think doing it, coming through the line is going to be a little difficult technology-wise. I'm not sure we can accommodate that, but we will certainly talk to our vendor about that. And I'm sorry, your third question about guidance to
Well,
folks that are
I
driving?
just, something that I thought about in a couple of discussions. So one, thank you for exploring the opportunity to use a debit card at the curb. That's one, thank you for that. But that second piece is I have a little bit of a concern as a mom, just hearing discussions about students driving to pick their lunches up during their sort of 30-minute lunch break. I know that it's a possibility for them to do that, but I just thought maybe and going back and looking at strategies, knowing students might be driving to pick their meals up, teachers may want to receive some sort of guidance to tell those students, hey guys, if you're going to drive to pick your lunch up, plan for that. So, you know, I'm not expecting an answer now, just asking you to consider thinking about those students that are driving to pick their meals up and preparing teachers, right? Because the teachers are going to expect them to come back, but
Correct.
give teachers just a heads up on here are some things you might want to share with those students that plan to leave to drive to get their lunch and drive back. Okay. Just a thought.
Okay.
I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Let's see. The other piece around nutrition is around posting what the meals are in advance. And while that might sound small, I think to many, they want to know what's going to be prepared in their meals. Now, usually in a normal day, you know, if you're in elementary school, it's announced over the intercom, I believe. But now that kids are at home, some families may want to know in advance, what does the meal look like for the week? Is that something that can be shared? I don't know if it would be shared by the teacher or posted online, but what are the meals going to be for the week? Because that would also help parents understand if they want to pay for it.
Sure. We post our menus now. We can continue to post the menus online for families to see what we're offering. Yes, ma'am.
Fabulous. Can we make sure we communicate that in our
Absolutely.
back-to-school packets as well? Also around the headphones, so one of the beautiful things I really appreciated about past teachers that my children have had is explaining how to use headphones, even for our high school seniors. So the sound in your ears are important. And so talking about the volume that hits our babies' ears is going to be significant because they're going to be using them even more often. So from a health perspective, if we can give some sort of can do, will do, or here's some helpful hints around using headphones because they're going to be using them even more now. And so sound impacting our little ones' ears is significant. So for consideration, please think about putting that in our back-to-school packets. I don't know if we want to just share some tips on sound in your ears. Similarly, I'm asking to put some tips on how to watch for signs distress in your eyes because our kids are going to be, watching, looking at these monitors more. So again, just consider putting some helpful tips around sound and around vision and what parents can look for when kids become uncomfortable or experience discomfort. Bear with me, I have a couple more things for consideration as well. Got to get to my laptop for those. Wanted to talk about Schoology for a moment and homework. So for many students that may take a picture of their work, so in the past they would take a picture of something, they would upload it. Then the teacher goes into the system, download that work, look at it, and then provide a comment. I'd like for us to explore ways of actually providing guidance or comments on the actual document. It really does make a difference for our students and for our teachers to be able to go to that exact spot, if it's an essay, to go to that exact spot to narrate around the guidance that they're given. So if we could, from an IT perspective, just take a look at that, that's going to be extremely significant when teachers are providing feedback this year virtually, because they won't have the face-to-face to give that. And so for the student who's trying to understand the comment from their teacher, if it's in that separate box, it may be hard to figure out what the teacher is even talking about because they don't have the face-to-face to give them additional information. I understand that, during the class time they may have the teacher, but when you send an assignment and the teachers download it and that takes a significant amount of time, they're not together. And so I want to advocate for all those teachers watching and the teachers that I've spoken to, I understand. So if there's any way that we can streamline that process of that whole upload, download, and the comment in a whole separate box, please consider that. And from the student's perspective, it really means a lot to better understand what your teacher is trying to tell you when they can put it in the exact spot that they're referencing. And it's hard to do because it's a picture, because they have to snap a picture. But if there's any technological way that we can do that, that would be really helpful for our students and for our teachers, and it would be a phenomenal win in saving time. And that might be my last one. Oh, phenomenal job on the tour of the facility. I absolutely fell in love as you were showing that. I think we are coming of age. We are getting hip, if you will, because the virtual tour, whether it's in real estate and now it's in education, I think that's a tremendous win. And I look forward to that continuing to evolve. I think we're going to see an expansion of virtual in other spaces that we never, ever thought of. So I want to say kudos to you for that. I also want to say I deeply love the enthusiasm around the back to school and getting excited about that. I think we need that. Our children need that. Our children need to see us excited during these challenging times because they're going to mimic what they see from our teachers and our staff socially, mentally. So I just wanted to say kudos on that too. Dr. Cashwell, I'm hopeful that we'll have an opportunity, school board, to see what the plans are for back to school for each school. So for school board members that want to be involved, we have the opportunity to do that. I want to be involved in every single back to school opportunity that I can be in. But I also wouldn't mind if other colleagues wanted me to be at theirs and they wanted to be at mine so that we can show this cohesiveness of being one, as well as enthusiasm. So if you could share that whenever that information is available, that would be great.
We will absolutely share a calendar of all the back-to-school events with the board.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Atkins.
All right,
Dr. Cashwell.
We are going to resume the presentation with the next section.
23rd, virtual learning will look and feel different than the learning experiences in March following the emergency school closure. Beginning September 8th, instruction for all pre-K through 12th grade students will be designed to move learning forward in a robust, rigorous manner designed for student mastery of skills and the attributes that align with the HCPS learner profile and the profile of a Virginia graduate. Let's now take a look at a short segment of a video that was shared yesterday with our families that helps paint the picture of what our students and parents can expect to see in our upcoming elementary virtual learning environment.
Hi everyone, I'm Andy Jenks with Henrico County Public Schools. And this video is meant to help show our families of elementary school students what virtual learning might look like during the first 9 weeks.
Good morning! Everybody awake this morning? Give me a thumbs up! Who's ready to go?
At elementary school, the day will begin promptly at 8 a.m. Students will log on to their device, either an iPad or a Chromebook, for daily attendance, morning announcements, class meetings, and in some instances, even a few songs.
Days of the week. Days of the week.
And if you're interested in seeing the video in its entirety, make sure you check out our HCPS website. In our continued commitment to provide high-quality and relevant professional learning, over 750 teachers and leaders had the opportunity to harness the insights and experiences of educator Dr. Doug Fisher in a 2-day learning workshop focusing on distance learning, engaging learner experiences in a virtual environment. This exciting professional learning opportunity assisted building capacity of administrators, specialists, coaches, and teachers to engage learners in a virtual setting. Dr. Fisher shared instructional approaches, including direct instruction, peer learning, and independent work that foster student regulation and move learning to rigorous and transfer levels. Vibrant discussions were held in small groups as leaders addressed equity challenges associated with distant learning and shared examples of how teachers can work to ensure that equity gains that have been realized are not lost. Participant feedback was overwhelmingly positive and included comments such as, "Straight fire today. Doug brought the sauce. Thank you so much for organizing. Huge win." The HCPS Day of Learning aligned to our continued work with the HLP, DLM, and leadership approaches to coaching, teachers, and staff. At this time, we'll pause and entertain any questions on virtual learning or professional learning.
Before I ask my colleagues, quick question. So are you able to have the capability for our students on all devices to blur their backgrounds? That's going to be very big as far as equity is concerned. Some people may not have a nice chair rail or crown molding behind them, but you know their environment is not something that they want to show to everyone. So I'm talking iPads plus the computers.
I do believe so, and I may let Mr. Maddox, when he comes up, kind of entertain that.
Yeah, and I just happen to have collaborated with the team and know the answer, and so Microsoft Teams is our preferred platform. There is a blurry background, and we're also, many schools are creating their own generic background that may have school logos or colors or something behind it. But yes, in our handbook, we make the recommendation that all students use that and that the teachers provide guidance on that.
Can I start, Ms. Kinsella? Thank you. I apologize. I just, virtual learning, I'm just, because big, because I'm hearing it from family advocates as well as parents and community members. And Dr. Cashwell and I had a conversation with an advocate around that same, because you can't learn if mentally you're not there because you're embarrassed because of what it looks like. So I just want to make sure that everybody has that equitable kind of thing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kinsella?
Yes, thank you for asking that, Reverend Cooper. I was going to ask about the training. What have we added for mental health at all levels when we go back? Have we learned how professional development for all levels?
So our HCPSU, which is our professional learning for teachers, there is significant time invested in the balance of a relationship, the importance of that, establishing that right off the bat, establishing routines at the very, very start. And of course, in having those routines and having that trust and sense of the student, that kind of works its way through the time. And there's also been, specific work with our SEALS team, our social emotional team, to go ahead and support teachers and counselors and trainings that they've had. And again, I know it's been mentioned up here before to be able to look for signs of possible distress of a student or signs of, we might need to have a one-on-one chat a little bit later outside of that, because that's important to keep that one-on-one connection with students.
And I might note for our public, since we'll be launching the document, and for the board, on page 33, there's a portion dedicated to social emotional learning that notes some of that. I think it's a great question and really is an important part of all that we've been doing to not only include space in our daily schedules for social emotional learning, whether it was through those advisories or the programs we have in place through Sanford Harmony at our elementary school and specific social emotional lessons for secondary. So thanks for that question.
Thank you. I've received some questions about what safeguards do we have for privacy during virtual learning? Are there going to be waivers parents sign, or especially when it comes to the asynchronous videos that may be recorded?
So we can certainly provide you some more information, and if you're seeking advice, legal advice, I know our attorneys would be happy to provide that to the board outside of this forum. But I would just say, in general, we've provided best practices and guidelines that maintain student safety at all time, which include things like the background, allowing students who may choose to turn their camera off for portions of things like a recorded lesson. So very similar to how we make sure we have permission to photograph students during the school day for any use. Similar permissions would be obtained, knowing that portions of the day may be recorded.
Okay. And then paper packets will still be available for students who may need them, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, our teachers will certainly be working with their individual students to understand their needs, but much of the planning, particularly at the elementary level, is focused on making sure that whether it's manipulative kits, things that, books, leveled readers, things that might need to get into student hands are distributed.
Okay. And then last question revolves around prep and substitute training as well as nurse training. For when we do go back into the buildings and for the staff that will be in the buildings, how do we look on staffing and professional development for the staff as to prep, substitutes, and nurses?
Certainly think that there's several folks who are looking like they were going to jump up at once. I didn't know who to call upon, but certainly we recognize it with all of our employee groups. So you'll hear later about specific training, our drivers, transportation, as people are returning to to fulfill any role, whether through the virtual environment or the eventual in-person environment, making sure that they not only understand the health and safety mitigation, but any unique aspects to their role. And so, Dr. Hughes?
Yes, so just recently, within the last 2 weeks, in fact, the Department of Human Resources and the Department of Learning, as well as the Department of School Leadership, came together in a think tank, if you will, to see if we could brainstorm what the day in the life of a substitute would look like in that virtual environment. So we have plans in place to do an onboarding, if you will, so that when subs are trained this year, as they come in, we'll give them professional learning on the Chromebooks, the laptops, what you would need, Schoology. We're looking at Teams, best practices for what substitutes should look for when they're providing that. Sorry, it's hard to talk with the mask on, for conferencing. And just to make sure that they can continue to provide the same excellence of instruction that we would want for our students, and so that the experience is in that virtual setting, just like it would be with the teacher, but we know that the substitutes will need training for that. So we're putting together this, and then when Human Resources hires the substitutes and actually onboards them, they'll have that training available.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Kinsella. Thank you, Ms. Agua. Ms. Shea?
Thanks, Dr. Hughes. I actually emailed a similar question to Ms. Kinsella about the substitutes to Dr. Hughes, because even though I've taught and I've substituted and I've been on Teams meetings, the thought of how to navigate those and fit all those pieces together gives me major anxiety. And so I really appreciate y'all being forward thinking on how to train our substitutes accordingly. Similar to substitutes, are we providing professional learning for our IAs? I've heard from quite a few exceptional education teachers, and one big piece is, especially for these self-contained classrooms, how much they utilize their IAs. And so in this new virtual environment, having the IAs up to speed on all the technology so that they can leverage their IAs to continue virtual when they might be in person one-on-one with the student, and vice versa.
Absolutely. Professional learning is being planned for the IAs as well. The teachers can assist the IAs with learning any material that they also need, that they would ask the IAs to help deliver, either virtually or while they're in the classroom. And then also we have the innovative learning coaches in every building, and we have asked the innovative team in central office to make sure that that's part of the training for the innovative learning coaches when they go back to school, to make sure that they have the IAs on their radar so that they, again, can have the skills that they need to assist with that virtual instruction.
Wonderful, thank you. Now that you mentioned ILCs, are we one ILC in every school, or are some of them still split between schools this year? Where are we on that?
Some of our smaller schools are still split, but for the most part, most of our schools have a full-time ILC.
Great, thank you. That's all from me.
Ms. Atkins?
Thank you. I do have a question. Great job on the video. I look forward to seeing it in its entirety. Can you share with me if we have voiceovers in other languages? I think it's significant that we pay attention to equity and that we have these videos done in different languages.
That's an observation that has come forward multiple times. At the moment, English is the only version of the video that exists, and that's primarily because the English version was completed yesterday. But more to the point is that that's certainly an effort that the school division would like to do moving forward. A recent example of this is not actually video, but rather audio translations of a message that Dr. Cashwell put out a week ago that directs people's attention to important information. So either the in-house translator or other translators for Arabic, for example, would not only translate the written message, but they would speak it into a phone and then send us the audio file. The same process could be done to dub over a video like this, for example.
Fantastic. I think that that's going to be critical in our virtual environments, making sure that when teachers do record their videos in advance, whenever we do something on a grander scale, like for all of our schools, that we make sure that we consider the voiceover in other languages. And I do appreciate, your response on that, Andy. I really do. I had another question around nutrition. Professional development, that's the question that I had. Do we have time built in the schedule for teachers to do professional development, or are they going to do that on their own?
No, we have been working with the divisional directors in terms of where that might be during the instructional day. At various levels, it takes place at various times. We know we have to have designated time to be able to tackle the large amount of digital resources we have, the new digital learning environment that we have, and then any unforeseen obstacles that might come up along the way. And for our teachers to feel comfortable, they've got to have that sense of, look, I have time to unpack this and unpack it in a meaningful way. So depending on the level, there is time built into the schedules throughout the week.
Fantastic. I think that we're going to...
Actually, we also amended the calendar at the last meeting to provide 3 professional learning days up to front load that and it's on their own time correctly. It's asynchronous. So we went ahead and front loaded that and turned 3 teacher work days to teacher holidays during the year to give them that, because it is a significant amount of professional development, and we want our teachers to do it, but and have time to do it meaningfully, but we want to also make sure it's not just putting more on their plate. So that
right, and so I am aware of that. So thank you for sharing that. But my question really was not around that. It was really around when I'm thinking about a teacher school day and making sure as they learn from their students what their students' needs are. Right? So when they learn what their students' needs are, there may be time built in their schedule. For example, when kids go back to school and you're using the G Suite and you're trying to do a smaller group, you may learn from your students that there's a greater need, and they may need time built into that schedule, not a separate day, which is what we voted on, but sometime in their day to digest that, to figure that out, to get with their other colleagues, to learn how do you best meet the needs of the children in your classroom.
Correct.
Right. So thank you for that.
You're
So I
welcome.
look forward to learning more. And that is all I have.
Great, thanks.
Oh, excuse me, then we will continue on with the presentation.
Sounds good. The first step in actively engaging all our learners is the key to any virtual learning environment. A collective effort from teachers, counselors, family advocates, and administrators will be the first step in ensuring we are meeting the academic and social emotional needs of our students. Digital resources such as SmartyAnts, Lexia Core, and Dreambox will be used to meet students where they are instructionally and provide engaging, self-adaptive activities to close gaps. Data from these programs, along with formative and summative assessments, will help drive intervention support in our virtual environment. Targeted activities and resources will also be used to support students in need of Tier 2 or Tier 3 instruction throughout the day. We understand that a language-rich environment is a key strategy for English language learners to gain command of their ability to listen, speak, read, and write. As part of our gradual phase-in planning, small groups of identified level 1, which are limited to non-English speaking students, will be invited in to attend in-person instruction. To maximize staffing, we will use a zoned approach to give our students time to actively engage in rich, language-based instructional blocks. This means students may not necessarily be with their own ESL teacher or meeting in their home school, but they will be in a location within their magisterial district for targeted support. Elementary students, of course, will come together in a zoned elementary school, while secondary will be at a zoned secondary school. Instruction will be delivered by an ESL teacher focused on direct language acquisition around the key areas of reading, writing, speaking, and listening, per the English Language Development Standards. Now let's take a closer look at how limited in-person instruction will take place within our Exceptional Education Department with Katie Smith, our Assistant Director of Exceptional Education.
Good afternoon. We are developing a plan to support students with disabilities while keeping safety and wellness for our students and the staff at the forefront of our considerations. It's important to note that many students will receive the same levels of support virtually as they would if they were starting the year in a traditional manner, as outlined in their IEPs. IEP teams will be asked to determine if an in-person opportunity is both appropriate for the student's health and individual circumstance, as well as if the learning opportunity is necessary in order for the student to make progress. In-person support will be provided following a period of time in which service providers are able to gather data and determine the appropriateness and need for in-person support after school resumes. In-person support will not look the same for all students and will be determined on an individual basis by IEP teams. Examples of support may include one-to-one or small group sessions, which may be provided by a paraprofessional or a teacher. Our goal is to limit small group sessions to 5 or fewer students. In-person special education support will be designed to address individualized students' disability-related needs in a targeted manner. IEP teams will be equipped to discuss any in-person supports for students who require one-to-one or targeted assistance to engage in the learning environment as we progress through the first quarter in our phased approach to in-person learning. Case managers will review all student IEPs and monitor implementation regardless of setting. We are confident that we can provide specially designed instruction to meet the needs of our learners virtually and through our limited in-person opportunities. Scott Thorpe, Director of Elementary Education, will now explain the limited in-person options available to our youngest learners and families.
We are planning to provide limited in-person learning opportunities to select students in grades pre-kindergarten through grade 3. It is our intention to phase in students in order to build relationships, facilitate initial academic screening, establish practice routines, lead one-on-one or small group instruction, and provide social-emotional support to students. In order to ensure the safety and health of students and staff, teachers or instructional staff will provide in-person instruction to students in groups of 5 or fewer. Additionally, teachers and students participating in in-person learning opportunities will wear a mask and adhere to social distancing guidelines. While content and activities will be tailored to meet the needs of the students participating, the in-person learning segments would focus on relationships, routines, and key reading and math skills. In terms of student selection, every pre-kindergarten and kindergarten student will be invited to participate in in-person learning opportunities. In grades 1 through 3, first consideration will be given to students who are performing below grade level. Mac Baton will now discuss a potential opportunity for limited in-person learning for career and technical education.
Here we have the limited in-person plan for the Advanced Career Education Center and the Academy at Virginia Randolph. Individually, ACE and AVR programs will have the opportunity to resume weekly, limited face-to-face instruction based upon the competency requirements starting October 5th, 2020. Teachers, specialists, and administrators will review individual program competencies and instructional sequence requirements for the first semester using a coding system to determine essential face-to-face instructional requirements by programs. Programs who have identified face-to-face requirements will be eligible to attend AVR and the ACE centers. Why do we need face-to-face instruction for certain CTE programs? We must provide face-to-face instruction required to obtain individual program certifications, provide face-to-face instruction to teach competencies not possibly taught virtually, provide face-to-face instructions required to obtain prerequisite certifications to progress in the coursework. For example, EMT students are required to pass their CPR certification before beginning the EMT coursework. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Jim Ellis, Director of Transportation, to talk about how our students will be brought back and forth to school safely.
Thanks, Mac. Okay, let's talk about how we're going to get students to school for limited in-person learning. Bus drivers and assistants will receive in-person training focused on our required protocols. This training involves completing a personal health screening at home prior to reporting to work, the proper use of personal protective equipment, cloth face coverings will be required, and face shields will also be provided should they be needed. Procedures for properly cleaning and sanitizing the bus after each run, and maintaining a daily route sheet to account for which staff and students are riding the bus each day. The daily route sheet will be maintained in the appropriate zone office should there be a need in the future to do any contact tracing. Students will be required to complete a health screening at home prior to coming to the bus stop and wear cloth face coverings when on the bus. The 3-foot social distancing allows one student per seat on the bus. The only exceptions are siblings or students living in the same household, as they will be allowed to sit together in one seat without the need for social distancing. Students will load from the back to the front and unload from the front to the back to minimize students' paths crossing. It's important to know that multiple runs will be required that differ from routine routes and time frames. In addition to transporting students, transportation may assist with the distribution of the following items to the neighborhoods: school meals, digital device, and learning resources. A resource all students will need to be provided is a digital device, and here to share more about that is Brian Maddox, our Director of Technology.
Good afternoon. So in preparation for the 2021 school year and the virtual start, HCPS Technology has been very busy. And I would like to recognize the efforts of the technology support team over the last 5 months and some of the significant efforts and successes that we've had. We continue to learn and get better, and we're going to work hard going forward. And with that, I want to share some of the efforts underway coming up in the technology landscape and a couple updates to support students and staff. HCPS Technology is currently distributing devices to students this month in preparation for the start of the school with virtual learning for the first 9 weeks. Communications are being shared now and in the coming weeks to families from principals on where student families need to go to receive technology before the start of the school year. The technology to be distributed to students will be iPads in pre-K and K, Chromebooks for grades 1 to 5, and laptops for grades 6 to 12. The distribution process started this week on August the 10th with rising 6th graders receiving a laptop and technology staff collecting their Chromebooks and charger if the students had one issued to them in the spring. And also new students to middle school also were receiving devices this week as well. The distribution scheduled for the week of August the 17th will be Chromebooks for first graders and all elementary students in need of one in grades 2 through 5. The last scheduled device distribution to students will be the week of August the 24th, which will be iPads for all pre-K and K students. If an elementary student in grades 2 to 5 already has a Chromebook from a prior distribution in the spring, or a secondary student has a laptop from last school year, they will continue to use the same device this school year. The distribution process will be a drive-up service like what we did in the spring for elementary Chromebooks, and the distribution will have staff exercising safety precautions and using personal protective equipment. This fall, support for technology for students and staff will continue at designated school locations, and more information will be coming soon to families with details on where they can go for support for technology once school has started. HCPS technology will ensure there is ample support across the entire division to meet all the support needs for students and staff. Since the beginning of July, technology support staff have been activating secondary laptop cameras to enable virtual classroom learning and engagement for the school year. As of August the 6th, 9,500 secondary student laptops have been brought to the support hubs by student families, and the cameras have been activated. And as of today, we're over 10,000. The activation of laptop cameras will continue up into the beginning of the school year. And as a side note, cameras on iPads and elementary Chromebooks are already all enabled. So for students to participate in remote learning, of course, they need access to the internet. HCPS has partnered with T-Mobile to provide Wi-Fi hotspots for students without internet in their home. And as of this week, over 600 hotspots have been issued to assist students in the need of internet access. And I want to share too, this week technology just received an additional 600 hotspots to distribute to families in need. In addition, we also encourage families that qualify to explore Comcast Internet Essentials program that offers internet access in their home for $9.95 a month, with the first 2 months being free. And we're sharing information about that. Lastly, of course, security of technology in the hands of students and staff is a top priority. HCPS has implemented CIPA-compliant web filtering for student and staff devices to block harmful and malicious content. Staff and student devices are also managed to ensure they are up to date and secure. HCPS technology has all technology assets tracked that are assigned to staff and students when they're issued. So to wrap up, technology has been working very hard since March to meet the technology needs across the entire division, and is prepared to support students and staff to ensure a smooth start to the school year. And with that, I'm happy to break for questions regarding limited in-person support, transportation, and technology, if there are any.
Thank you so much. Let me start with Ms. Atkins first.
So I have my own testimony for the technology department, and I'm going to correct you on a statement that you made. You said that the technology department has been working hard since March. I want to correct you and say you've been working hard for years. I don't know if the technology department has heard that. I know I've not heard that level of thank you, but coming from me to you, the technology department has been working hard for years. And it's very much appreciated. And I just needed to say that to you while you were here and I were here. The other piece that I want to share with you is how important consistency is. I had my own experience getting my own son laptop, and I've talked to other families, and they've had similar experiences in other areas, and it is providing this level of comfort. And I want to let you know, so you can share it with your staff, that the consistency that you're providing is providing comfort. So they know that they're going to get exactly what they're going to get, and when they get home, it is working. And that's so comforting. So I wanted you to know that as well. Regarding the hotspot, something that I found to be extremely helpful is understanding how many individuals can use a hotspot at one time. So for those families that may have 4 or 5 individuals in their home, you have one person that might be streaming music, someone else may be watching a movie on Netflix. Would you consider, in your department, consider just sharing tips on the usage, the bandwidth, and the speed, and the differences between those? Nothing fancy, but just really explaining to families, some families, if you will, one, how to actually use the hotspot. My recommendation for that is when you receive the hotspot, you get the little ticket that gives some explanation on it, But I also think it would be helpful if you add maybe 2 or 3 bullets to share. You know, it's recommended that maybe up to 3 people can use this hotspot. And if you have someone streaming online, then that bandwidth could potentially be reduced. So just something for you to consider.
Sure, absolutely.
So those are my thoughts around technology. So thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
I did have a question around PPE, now that we're talking about coming into school face-to-face, particularly at AVR. I wanted to see if I could get an update on the plexiglass installation over at AVR.
While folks are making their way up, I'll go ahead and try to give my best estimate, and if I've missed something, they can add to it. But certainly, we've begun to receive the shipments of PPE, including both face coverings, other material, gloves, sanitizers, wipes, as well as the plexiglass, and are working through those installations. And I think that certainly Matt can speak specifically to some of the AVR programming and what that limited in person is, but they've worked really hard to make sure that there are strict guidelines of how that would look, which protocols would be followed, and so forth. So if you want to add to that, please do.
I will check back and follow back up with you on that question, because I'm not sure specifically at which locations, but I know that we have started with what we have. We've started putting things up where they, you know, at certain locations. I'm just not specifically sure which locations that would be right now.
And that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely
I
fair.
mean, just because of the disparity of the product itself,
Right.
that makes it difficult. So we're just kind of putting them up as we get it and where it needs to go.
And would add that we won't begin any in-person contact if we didn't have the materials available to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know the limitations on that plexiglass, so I just want to continue to sort of stay updated on sort of where we are, because it's an issue across our entire nation. And so just at top of mind for me, just figuring out how far along we are and has it been shipped and all those types of things are just at top of mind for me. So
Will
thank
do.
you for that, and I
You're
think
very
that's
welcome.
absolutely fair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So my next question is around special education. This also borders PPE a little bit as well, but as we look at bringing staff back into the buildings around special needs, not just physically, but mentally as well. I'm thinking about students with dyslexia and such, so that when they come in and have to do evaluations, it's very difficult for a student to do a dyslexia evaluation or other evaluations with the mask on. Can you share with me some of the strategies around how we're going to do evaluations while using protective equipment?
Absolutely. I think it's important to share too, we just don't have the traditional face coverings. We've also ordered clear face masks. So some of our evaluators are students who may be deaf and hard of hearing. Will be able to see the lips of their evaluators, and also our speech pathologists as they deliver related services to our students. With speech services, also will have access to clear face masks, not just the traditional cloth coverings.
Right, because that's another area where I think there's a shortage as well, is with the clear face coverings as well as the full face shield. So
Yes.
do we have face shields for
We
our
do. So
specialists?
we've actually
Okay.
already distributed evaluation kits to each one of our schools. So every school, because we started in-person evaluations again, it's not even September, August 3rd. So each school got 2 face shields in additions to cloth coverings and hand sanitizer, and then all of our SLP, speech language pathologists, have the coverings. They just came in this week. We actually ordered 1,200 clear masks, so we'll be distributing those quickly. They just arrived in our office yesterday.
Fantastic. So someone had already predicted my questions, because I was absolutely thinking about that clear piece, because there's some PPE that specialize just for some of the situations that our staff are going to encounter, because they're in close proximity with our students, and we want to make sure that the student and the staff member are protected as well. So I'm very pleased to hear that that shipment came in yesterday.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Shea?
Thank you, Mrs. Atkins. Well, since you're up here, I'll start with my exceptional education questions. I know I've talked to some exceptional education teachers really concerned about the students coming in the building, and particularly with the students who already have some medical existing conditions, as well as frankly, it's going to be hard for them to continue to wear PPE when they're in the building. So I've heard from them that it would be really helpful to have very clear guidelines for the IEP teams as they're evaluating. As you said, I believe you called it, is it appropriate and is it necessary for our students? And so the more clear our guidelines can be for our IEP teams as they're reviewing these and making these amendments to the IEP, the better that will be for those instructors. Anyway, so have y'all come up with a list of suggestions for the IEP team?
So we're currently working on that, but I do think it's important to share that teachers who work with students where cloth coverings or face masks may be difficult for them to wear, we have ordered additional PPE for those classrooms as well, outside of what a teacher who's in a collaborative class may be required once in-person support resumes. So they will have additional options. We've ordered additional materials as students require restroom needs or changing or gowns and gloves and face shields for those classrooms as well.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Thorpe, could you share with us a little bit about the logistics and the timeline for our K-3 learners? So I know you said that priority is going to be given to our 1 through 3 students who are performing below grade level. What's the timeline for the first wave of those students? What's the timeline for our kindergartners look like?
Yes, thank you. And so while we're finalizing our plan currently, I will tell you, clearly our first priority is bringing in our pre-kindergartners and kindergartners for a successful first experience with their teacher one-on-one. And it is our hope that we can do that in the time frame of September. We're still working on our time frame for bringing in students in grades 1 through 3. And when we have those details, we'd be happy to send those on to you.
So when you say in the time frame of September, how likely is it that we could get at least our first wave of pre-K and K in the building that first week of school? That might, Dr. Cashwell might have to.
I will tell you, in the first week of school, we're not going to be completely certain of all the students that we have. We are anticipating a great deal of registrations. We would want to have a good opportunity to know exactly who they were, as well as we would want to have our pre-kindergartners and kindergartners to have successful, predictable first experiences in the virtual environment before moving to the one-on-ones. That is the thinking in our planning right now.
And I will add to that, I know that particularly, as Mr. Thorpe mentioned, for pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, getting them in as soon as possible is our goal. Also recognizing we'll probably be having students come to us and new, as is really in any year, but particularly this year, brand new kindergartners enrolling late in the game. But our pre-kindergarten and kindergarten staff, and this was mentioned in the presentation, will be looking to do virtual meetings at the bare minimum one-on-one with a student and their families to orient them to the new school year, and then working very quickly as each individual school and staffing are able to bring them in.
So in that first wave of students that we can bring in with our pre-K and K, is that when our first wave of 1 through 3 students that need kind of additional gaps filled, would they come hypothetically with that first wave, or would they be then a second wave?
I think our goal is to get them in as soon as we can, recognizing it might be later than that. Our teachers will be working to diagnose their students, assess their learning gaps, and determine what their needs are so that they can appropriately then prioritize bringing folks in.
And in our tentative timeline that we're working on, when's the back end of that timeline that the last wave of our students will be hitting our doors for the limited in-person?
Well, I mean, I think we have to recognize that while we may have good intentions of getting students in and then maybe working with our families, and that would, by the way, this communication families should expect from their school directly. This wouldn't be central communication as they work on individual plans. That, should health conditions change for any reason, we wouldn't, that might make that not possible. That would have to be taken into consideration. But the idea would be, I'd say by the 2nd or 3rd week of school, and then, through October, we'd begin gradually bringing in groups of students sort of in the priority that Mr. Thorpe mentioned, with our older students probably falling at the later end of that window at the beginning of October, once teachers have a really good idea of students' gaps, learning needs, that sort of thing, and begin to group them appropriately.
Thank you. I think that provides a lot of clarity for our families that have heard about these limited in-person interactions, but feel a little bit fuzzy about how that's going to happen. I know we talked about a zoned approach for our EL learners. Would that be also, are there any considerations to use that as well for our exceptional ed students? As particularly for our elementary schools that have like one exceptional ed teacher, could they partner with the school next door to collaborate for virtual and in-person offerings to happen simultaneously?
Absolutely. We're absolutely considering that approach. Our principals are actually contacting our exceptional education teachers this week to ask that exact question, if they'd be willing to serve in a zone program. So we are thinking the same way, Ms. Shea, in terms of trying to make sure that we can support our students to the greatest extent possible.
Great, thank you so much. And then I'll just end with a small positive anecdote for Mr. Maddox, because so rarely do we get positive anecdotes, but my rising first grader is just like so excited about her Chromebook. We're a no kid device family, and so they are just like jazzed up. And we talked about it yesterday and explained like it's like a library book. We're gonna borrow it and take very, very good care of it and then return it. And she goes, I think that's just a fantastic system. Have you told people about this? They should be very excited. I was like, well, we're trying to get the message out. And she says, well, remind them that liquids and electronics don't mix. So there's a lot of excitement, I know, bubbling out for some of our students in getting ready for virtual education. So thank you for your team for filling those gaps, because we know without internet and without devices, we wouldn't be able to do any of this extraordinary instruction that our teaching and learning team are planning. So thank you for being that critical piece of hardware for all of us.
And that's awesome. I love hearing that. So that's great.
All right, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shea. Ms. Ogren.
Just real quick, if you could highlight, I've had a number of people ask how repairs and things like that are going to happen once we start. Will they continue to go to our help desk that are in place now, but are we going to have more of them? Are they going to go to their home school? And how do they let someone know when they have a problem?
Yes, ma'am. So what we did back in the spring when COVID-19 came about, we had the 4 remote support hubs at the 4 high schools. So with us going with 100% virtual learning and a lot more devices out there, we're giving out a lot of devices right now this month. We're actually going to be going to, if you're a middle school student, you're actually going to go to your middle school to get support, and you're going to get hands-on support. There'll be a hub there. If you're in a high school, you're going to go to your high school and you're going to get support. And if you're in elementary school, you're going to go to your closest high school to get support. So we're going to have all the secondary schools offering support.
Now, will the parents need to make appointments, or will it be just as needed, or that kind of thing? Because, our elementary kids haven't had to experience this much so far. So that's what I'm hearing from, at least.
Yes, ma'am. So there's the option they can send an email to the help desk email address, which is posted on the directory on the main site. They can actually call the help desk number and leave a voicemail, or they can actually just go to the location. We're going to have the staff actually easily accessible, like we did over the summer and in the spring, right there out front, weather permitting. So they can actually go get the support right there at the school without having to worry about going into the school, navigating the school. So they can use the help desk system to arrange that if they like, or they can just go. And of course, we'll be exercising safety precautions too at that same time.
Any chance of doing remote repairs? I know it's been done in the past, but can they expect that?
I would love to be able to do that, but I think it's somewhat limited because we're very dependent on the network of the family in the home, and that could be very challenging. And sometimes it's really hard to do remote support, as you all probably know, because sometimes it's very challenging for the technical support person to be able to see your screen. So at that point, we want to remote into the screen, and sometimes, we might have that functionality, we may not have that functionality.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that it for you? Okay. Ms. Kinsella. Thank you, Ms. Ogren.
Yes, I have some technology questions as well. Some of them have already been answered. I thank you for bringing up that if our elementary students already had Chromebooks from the spring learning or this summer, that those cameras are already activated. Thank you for highlighting that. Access to Wi-Fi continues to be a problem across our schools. If we run out of hotspots, what happens?
So we're actively managing that inventory very closely. We're partnering with T-Mobile, so the hotspots that we just received this week, it took us a couple weeks to get those. I've been promised that we'll actually get those in a quicker time turnaround. So with the 600 we just got in, and we were down to 50 hotspots on Monday, and the 600 came in on Monday, so we were like right on top of that. We're actively managing that inventory, and if we get below, say, for example, 300 hotspots, and we're seeing how they're going out to families on a given day, we're going to be actually ordering more hotspots. So the plan is we do not want to run out of hotspots. We want to make sure we get those. And the good news is back in March, everybody was trying to get hotspots. And you couldn't get a hotspot anywhere because schools and organizations, and they were on back order for a couple months. That's not the case now, which is great. So the turnaround time is a lot quicker. So we want to stay in front of that to make sure we don't run out of hotspots for families in the coming weeks before school and even during school. So we're going to stay on top of that.
Are we forecasting that our supply will meet the demand that we have from our families, at least those that don't have Wi-Fi at all? And then what about the weak signals? I worry a lot about not having the bandwidth. So many of our families may not have the bandwidth to do the virtual learning. I mean, do we have a plan for that?
So we're staying on top of the inventory to meet that need and actually get those hotspots in. If we start getting to a point of where we think we're getting low, a couple hundred, 200 to 300 is my kind of cap. I want to order more at that point. As far as like the families that live in areas where, you know, it may be challenging to get a good signal, even with the T-Mobile hotspot, maybe they live in the eastern part of Varina and it's very challenging to get a good signal out there. Providing them with the hotspot, even though they can't be maybe serviced by a Comcast or a provider because they're too far out. Having a hotspot will give them the ability to have some mobility to maybe move to a place where they could actually get a better signal. We're also going to be providing, and we're doing this now in the secondary schools, we're setting up outdoor APs, access points for the Wi-Fi of the school, to where if you're in the bus loop or you're at the front of the school, you're going to be able to get on the Wi-Fi signal at the school. So they could travel to the school as well and try to work. Not ideal, it's not, but if the hotspot is not working for them, we're going to try to, you know, offer options and alternatives to them.
Okay,
But the
and
hotspot will give them some flexibility to move, but it's not ideal that they be out of the home, of course, we understand. But we'll do our best.
Okay, and then my last question was about the frequency of having our most vulnerable or those who need it most phased back in the building. What is the frequency of per week that we expect to see students, or will it won't be per week, or is it?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to
different
depend.
phases?
IEP teams would probably be determining the frequency, and it may vary greatly for student to student based on their need. And then I would say similarly, the idea that there may be limited, like one-on-one might be a one-time thing, and then it might shift to small group for the other age groups, and that frequency might be weekly, it might be every other week. I think it's really going to be based on more information that we're going to need coming from our teachers, getting to know their students. But I see some folks have stepped up, so I'll let them tackle that and add to.
I absolutely agree with everything Dr. Cashwell has said. I think it's important to remember when IEP teams meet, they're going to have the opportunity to really have data in front of them from the beginning of the school year to talk about what the students' challenges may be, but also to identify the goals, because we really want to make sure that our in-person opportunities are specific to the goals that the student has for their annual IEP. So we're not just going to be teaching them maybe we might be reviewing content that they learned through Tier 1 instruction or in their virtual setting, but we maybe really need to provide some face-to-face direct instruction on the goals outlined in their IEP. So it's really going to be individualized and targeted to the specific need, and that the team determines that the student requires that need.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all.
Chair Cooper, I have one short question I skipped
Yes, ma'am,
by
you should.
accident.
Sure.
When Mr. Thorpe was talking about all the precautions that our elementary teachers were going to go through and that teachers would wear masks, I just also want to assure, because I know my email is going to blow up about it, our students will also be wearing masks when they come in the building as well, correct?
That's correct.
Yep.
Thank you.
They got to follow our health mitigation plan. That includes being screened before they come in.
I can't wait for some bedtime reading tonight, Dr. Cashwell.
That's right.
So real quick, Dr. Cashwell, this is kind of a tag team with you and Mr. Maddox, so I'm kind of on you, but it's on him as well. So I don't think I know the number of hotspots we have out now. Have we shared that number? Well, how many do we have? You might not know specifically, but give me an idea.
Yes, sir. So as of Monday, we actually had 575 hotspots out in the community. And then we actually have 625 in inventory at that time. And we just received another 600. So we have 1,225 hotspots, which about half of them are out in the community right now.
Does that include the spring distribution?
Yes, ma'am, it sure does. That's right.
So if the methodology that we're employing to distribute our content is online, and we have over 50,000 students, but we have less than 2,000 hotspots out, I have some trepidation. So I need to know, how can we ensure that every individual who needs one can get one? And then the language says, while supplies last. That sounds like, I'm going to get a sale.
Sure.
And I'm not being facetious.
No, your concerns are absolutely reasonable and things we've thought clearly through. So we did have the opportunity in the spring to get to know and ask who was going to need it during our period of emergency learning. And we were able to meet the need at that time. So anyone who said they needed one via elementary or high school got one. We recognize, though, that there might be now additional need beyond that. So we did ask all of our families if they needed one in that spring period. But going into the new year, wanted to make sure we had a similar number on hand should needs increase. Maybe someone's situation has changed based on the COVID situation, or they didn't initially indicate need, but now they have that need. So we did have a pulse on how many needed it in the spring, and we did fully meet that need and then have of leftover inventory, but knowing the critical nature of making sure that everyone was going to have access, we wanted to make sure we increased that inventory so we'd be able to continue bridging that gap. And so we're going to remain flexible and make sure that we're, being responsible with our resources and not over ordering, but ordering enough that we have them on hand. And certainly we know that we were fortunate to have ordered proactively in the spring, so that we've not yet reached a point where we've not been able to meet the demand, but we want to keep up that momentum.
So the statement gives the implication that there will be a limited amount and they will not be available. That statement is very definitive in kind of conveying that. Is there a way that we can say definitively, if you need a hotspot, you will get one, whoever it is? Can that statement be made or not? If not, then we need to figure out budgetary, because again, if for 9 weeks we're going to be on.
Well, I don't think it's a matter of ordering and having the inventory. I mean, at some point, there may be a supply-demand issue that's outside of our control when it comes to, providers who, like in this case, it's T-Mobile, but whatever it might be beyond that, who are manufacturing the devices. So, certainly I don't think we want to get into a position of promising something we can't know. We do have a good handle on how many initially indicated they needed it. And so, that was a research-based decision, and we asked who needs it, we got the number, and we made sure to order then above and beyond that. And so while it's still not as concrete going into the fall, we're still early, asking our parents, asking our families who needs those hotspots, so that if we find we need to increase our inventory, we can work to do that. And our hope would be that demand would be met by the supplier. But I think that's the piece that is more the reason we wouldn't make that promise. A number of school divisions across the Commonwealth are relying on different models that don't include individual hotspots. We're very fortunate to be able to do that, to have been able to devote the resources to do that, and live in a county where, other than some small portions of our county, there is broadband access that, is usable for a hotspot. But should we need to, if we find that for some reason we were to get into a scenario there were families with need and we didn't have the hotspots, we would work with them to find alternate scenarios, whatever that might be. Whether we talked about this idea of mobile access, whether it's a van that might go into a community, a bus, something like that. I think we would stop at nothing to make sure they'd have the access, even if it wasn't through a Wi-Fi hotspot.
Well, I appreciate that kind of statement, because that's so integral to the success. And I think I do, again, agree with our desire to go above and beyond what may be the minimum expectation. But as we put this emphasis on access to equity, opportunity, and equality, I think that's so important. So thank you for kind of, dispelling and debunking that.
And if I could add just one thing really quickly, Reverend Cooper, to that point. So when Dr. Cashwell mentioned the survey that went out to families, I worked very closely with Tiffany Hinton, and I got the results to that particular question. And I looked at it east versus west, how many respondents. And based on the survey results, of around 2 to 3% in the West End said they didn't have internet, and it was around 4 to 5% in the East End said they didn't have access to internet in the home. So we looked at that and we said, okay, this is about kind of where we are based on what we're hearing back from the families who did respond, and we planned accordingly and had the inventory coming in. I anticipate as a division, we're probably closer to maybe 10% of families don't have internet in the home, and that's based on a connectivity tool that's been provided by the VDOE called i3 Connectivity. It's also based on census data from about probably 6 years ago, which is old. So knowing that there's about probably 10%, 5,000 students in the county that may not have internet in the home, about probably, there's about 35,000 unique households in Henrico County for this 50,000 students. So knowing that, we know there's probably somewhere around 3,000 family homes that don't have internet, just looking at the math. So with us having 1225 now and being able to really get the inventory in quickly, partnering with T-Mobile, we should be able to meet those needs in time. The only unknown is what could be the demand in a given day, where we could have many families come out and we work to meet that need. Right now, we're in a very good place, and if we had a lot of families come out wanting a hotspot, we would get on top of that very quickly. And heaven forbid we didn't have the supplies at that time, as Dr. Cashwell said, we would get them that device as quickly as we could, which should be in quick order.
Well, I guess to that statement, thank you, there's the distinction between our supply compared to our suppliers, and I think that's the key. Right. It's not just we until our supplies last. It's when the persons or individuals that are supplying to us, their supplies last. But we are committed to making sure that all of our students have, it's not just about, it's connectivity as well. It's not an east-west thing as much as it is connectivity for all of ours, because I know for a fact in a lot of households in my district that internet and cable is a luxury. It's not a necessity. It's on the hierarchy of what's important to have in my household, the cable bill is the lowest, and that's the first thing that gets cut. And so for me, I just want to make sure that our families do know, regardless of where you live, that we are committed to connectivity to ensure that you have access to the distribution of the content that we want your child to have for a successful year. So
absolutely.
And if supply chain with hotspots is an issue, that's not the only way to get internet access, and we would begin to look at those other options.
And I think, just to add, I don't want to beat this down, but just a few things to add to this.
Can you speak in the mic, Ms. Pritchard?
Yes. While supplies last, that verbiage was put in there because we didn't want somebody to show up and felt like they were promised something that we were not able to deliver at that specific point in time, and that we would take their name and address it and get the hotspot to that part. And we've made it available throughout the entire summer to let people know that these were available to pick up as well. So, I mean, you know, we've done, I feel like, the due diligence to get the word out and entertain the possibility of getting these things out to our constituents.
Well, no, I appreciate the clarity because, again, intent and interpretation are two different things, fine line, right? So as long as we're just clarifying here, we're not saying our supplies, like Dr. Cashwell said, supply chain, right? So, but we're committed to figuring out ways collectively and creatively to ensure connectivity and access. So I'm good.
And if you don't mind, I did have another statement that I wanted to share. I think it's also important when we're thinking about urban and rural communities, and we're thinking about the density of population and internet access as well as accessibility. You're looking at a parent who had a child and we went to get a hotspot, because I live in an area where it's dense. You know, the fibroids that run underneath the railroads makes it much harder for the speed, and speed is important as well as bandwidth. And so I think it's also important to understand that sometimes internet access is not based on your financials, it's based on where you live. And I just want to make sure that I know I shared before, it's critical, important, and really important to educate our families around what the hotspot does. So when the survey went out in the spring, I believe it was an online survey. I believe I got the survey through my child's principal, right? I got it because I do have internet, but I also understand after 6 o'clock, there will be no Netflix watching, or the wheel will continue to spin, because when the majority of people in my neighborhood go on to internet, it slows down or completely stalls. And so education is important, and that's why I said I think, and also in the spring, if the survey went out via internet and you're a person who doesn't have internet, you didn't get that survey. So I want to just be clear that educating our parents around, one, what the hotspot does, the limitations if you have multiple kids in your home that are streaming, how it reduces, and their limitations are clearly apparent there. And also keep in mind, particularly in my district for areas, and you're looking at one, that the internet is intermittent or non-existent at times, that if you send a survey via internet and I don't have internet, I didn't get the survey, so you don't have a fair assessment of who needs it. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and so I absolutely believe due diligence was done to try to understand who needs it, but it may be worth exploring doing it again in different languages as well. So just something I wanted to throw out at you, that we just don't look at financials. We have to look at a variety of things like languages, where you live, as well as your income and affordability.
Yes, ma'am, and I do want to share too, when we talk about the financials to support the internet service for the families who don't have it in the home, we have the resources to provide every family with internet in the home that needs it. So the finances are not a problem, and that's thanks to division leadership and Chris Sorensen and others. Also, Henrico Education Foundation has done a lot to support this as well, which is fantastic.
I think it's awesome, and I just can't give you more kudos other than getting over here and doing a dance, that I am just really appreciative of the technology team. I think that it's going to take the technology team for us to stay on that journey of excellence, period. I don't care about the curriculum and all these other things unless we tie it to the conversation of technology. It won't work. And I know that it's working because of your team. So just throwing all these considerations at you, because I think in order for us to continue to chase excellence, your team will absolutely be the reason, one of the major reasons that we get there. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Cashwell, may I real quick on, you making ask, but for bus riders, are we asking, how are we doing health screenings? Will we ask questions? Are they going to be screened? What's the process for that?
For anyone to ride a bus, students, once we get to the in-person piece, whether it's limited in person or at some phase beyond now, assuming the health plan's still in place, given health conditions, we're asking them to assert to certain health questions before they get on the bus. So our bus drivers wouldn't be screening them, but we'd ask that their temperature be taken at home and that they can answer yes to a number of questions, or no, depending on how they're phrased, but rather than displaying symptoms of illness, having had any exposure and that sort of thing. Similar to the screening questions you're often asked before you'll enter some of our HCPS facilities. So, and then we, have mentioned that periodic screenings, once we have folks in our buildings, that our school nurses will be able to take periodic temperature checks and so on.
All right, if there's no more questions, I'll hand it over to Adrienne Cole-Johnson, who will share additional information about support for our families through Family and Community Engagement Department.
Thank you, Mr. Maddox. And Adrienne's going to take us through the home stretch of this presentation. Last but certainly not least.
Thank you, Brian. As so many of my colleagues have touched upon, equitable engagement is truly central to our collective work. In preparation of the upcoming school year, it has been critical for us to understand the importance and the need to deepen our connection with our families and our community. They are our stakeholders, and there is no way we will accomplish our feats as a district without their active engagement, feedback, and support. Whether considering technology needs, meal distribution, or additional support for guardians, the insight and efforts of our Family and Community Engagement Department has been woven into the fabric of our instructional plan. Our mission continues, and that is to highlight a build, bridge, and boost model as we kick off the school year. Building relationships and staying connected to resources, bridging high-impact partnerships and collaborations, and boosting transformative family engagement district-wide and in our school communities. Specifically, we are deepening our relationships in every facet of our work. Our students and families should expect consistent availability from staff such as family advocates, social workers, and school counselors. With a social-emotional learning lens, staff will provide extra attention and care to the interactions and involvement of students and families during this virtual learning environment. Our advocates will be prepared to support guardians in various ways, ranging from awareness on how to use Schoology and other learning management tools to the creation of relevant and helpful virtual family engagement activities. Functioning as the resource connectors in our school communities, our staff will be able to work across departments and agencies to assist with whole family supports. Along the lines of resources, our Family and Educator Resource Center continues to collect useful information and opportunities from nonprofit partners and other community efforts that are most useful to our families at this time. This includes areas such as virtual tutoring providers, overall county supports, or even connection to entities providing financial support to Henrico families during COVID. By proactively compiling resources, our goal is to be knowledgeable and responsive. Our students, families, and staff should expect a resourceful and well-connected department as we all navigate virtual learning environments together. We received great feedback on our family learning series, and we are prepared to relaunch the effort in September. Stakeholders should expect a deeper dive into specific strands with a broad range of presenters and workshop hosts. The increased engagement that has happened through these sessions has truly been beneficial. Identifying child care supports for staff and families has been a significant focus for our department as well. We are working closely with traditional after-school program partners such as Henrico PAL, HEF's Learning and Discovery Program, the YMCA, and the Cultural Arts Center to support full-day child care options for working families. Parks and Recs, along with our community learning centers, will serve as an additional after-school support for our families. Henrico County General Government is a partner as well as we explore ways to support our most vulnerable families. Lastly, but certainly not least, our faith partners, civic and community-centered organizations, and business community members have also been creative and innovative with identifying how we best support our families. While we excitedly await the first day of school, we stand ready to support our students and our families. And at this time, on behalf of everyone else who's presented, I would love to take a moment to thank the board for their support, to Dr. Cashwell for her leadership during this journey, and to all of the staff who have worked tirelessly to ensure the 2020-2021 school year is going to be an amazing year for our staff and students. And I'm available to answer any questions as well.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to start Ms. Kinsella.
I'm just going to thank you for all the work you've done, you and your team, and equity and diversity since our buildings have been closed, as well as everybody else that works for Henrico County Public Schools. The most asked question I've gotten was, our schools are not, if schools are not daycares, so why can community partners use our schools for daycare, but we can't have in-person learning? That's probably the most commonly asked question at this point, given a recent daycare announcement.
Absolutely, and I can jump in on that. Thank you for sharing that. And so I think one thing to consider is the really unique needs that were needed if opening a school, whether you're talking about transportation or meals. Another thing to clarify is that the programs that will be in our schools will really have their own staffing model to determine the capacity for the schools. It's also important to think about the ratio as well. We're looking at an average of about a 10-student ratio. And within those schools, you're looking at small groups too. So 6, I think at most about 10 groups that would be in our building. Our intent is really to assist in connecting those in the community with childcare needs and quality, affordable childcare.
I think Dr. Tigan has something to add to that. Did I see you approaching? I didn't want to.
Well, actually, Adrian said much of what I was going to say, but that, you know, we They are a separate entity. They're licensed
Yes.
childcare providers, and they are just really using our facilities. And most importantly, because we may have staff in the buildings as well, we're expecting them to follow our health plan. And so they'll have to abide by everything that would be happening. But it is a lot different, as Adrian said about size, when you think of the number of students in an elementary school and even what half of that might be versus what, our daycare providers are, these nonprofit programs are being able, the programs in our schools would be small. And so we're letting them use our facilities, as we often do, let others use our facilities when we, so just wanted to share that. We have been doing this, just so you know too, the Y and HEF have been offering childcare for first responders since the YMCA started, I think, in March, and HEF started in June. So they've been doing this since then.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsella. Is that it for you, Ms. Kinsella? I'm good. Okay, none for you, Ms. Ogburn?
I'm good.
Okay, Ms. Shea?
Thank you. My questions also revolve around childcare, and I know in some ways y'all aren't the ones to communicate my frustration to on this, but I echo Ms. Kinsella. And I understand it's not apples to apples. It's different. The programs for childcare that are going to be in our school are going to be able to maintain much smaller pods than we would have ever been able to with even 50% capacity. So I understand it's different. It's just so hard to vote and to say it's not safe for our students to come in the building and then have our students coming in the building to be utilizing childcare. I know that childcare plan has kind of ebbed and flowed a lot in the last 3 weeks since the last time we were here. And as ideas came together, then external pieces would cause them to, and I really appreciate everybody's efforts to doggedly make sure that there was some solution. But I know we internally talked a little bit about utilizing Parks and Rec, and that there's some other localities that have been able to do that with a cost-neutral program. Can you share with our constituents why we're going with the nonprofit approach as opposed to a county government Parks and Rec?
Well, certainly I wouldn't say it's that we, HCPS, are going with any one over another. And so I think Adrian mentioned in her presentation that our network of plugins, plugging our families who need quality, affordable enrichment, extensions, childcare, goes far beyond YMCA, Henrico, and PALS, and a number of those folks were mentioned here. I think the difference with the 3 providers we're talking about is, A, they've all been licensed to operate on our site during the school year in an aftercare model. And so the question was really, do we continue to have them operate in our sites in a different format than after school during the school day, given that our buildings are closed during the school day and we're entering the predominantly virtual model. And so we had, knowing that childcare is a need across the community, that's only increased with the predominantly virtual day. I think that need's always been there because our school hours have never met the needs of many families, and thus the aftercare programs and enrichment programs. But because those folks are licensed in our schools, they have connections in our communities, they had been doing first responder care, it's natural to examine whether or not, if they were pivoting their models to offer an all-day program, would we continue to allow them to use our buildings? And that's what it really is. It's allowing them to use our facility. And we certainly have had to do that very carefully because we know that with our health mitigation strategies in place, we can't just say, yes, you can continue to use the building as you always have. We have to look at things like, how many children do you think you'll be serving? How can we isolate any program you have from anyone else who's in our buildings, to our own staff members who we've said can teach from their classrooms? So, we've been working a whole team of folks on examining which buildings might work and, recognizing that in some cases we may have to use a high school rather than an elementary where a child care provider may be licensed after school, so that we can isolate folks from our staff in the buildings, because that's critically important. And so absolutely the folks who we've mentioned here as far as operating in our buildings, we continue to want to have strong partnerships with plugging our families into those resources, but it goes far beyond that. And so Recreations and Parks did have a free summer blast program. We assisted in helping them, connect our folks who we know may be in need to those programs, to other programs that we're aware of in the faith-based community, Cultural Arts Center. There's so many programs out there that may not operate in our schools, but we still consider to be in our network of connections. And so, and interestingly enough, I don't believe there was a full enrollment in the Summer Blast program, even though it was offered free of charge. So we also know that, the YMCA programs, which during the emergency closure of schools were operated out, the YMCA facilities weren't reaching capacity as well. And so, but we heard from our community as we announced our plans from the fall that this was a great concern and need. And so we wanted to make sure we form a strong network of connections where we're able to continue to offer our facilities to those who were already licensed to do so. We've wanted to be able to make that connection, recognizing it comes with some limitations. And certainly we are offering limited in-person instruction, which I would say mirrors some of the practices, if you will, that are this idea of small scale. And so the reason that these programs are able to offer these in our buildings on this very small scale is similar to how we're able to do limited in-person on a very small scale. And so I think it kind of fits with that strategic model that we're looking at across the division.
Dr. Cashwell, I think you made many great points, but two particularly I want to reiterate is the difference in what we've heard from our community with the actual utilization rate in our community. So, we've heard from people about the concern around childcare, and many of my colleagues shared the same 3 weeks ago. But knowing that Summer Blast, which was free of charge, hasn't been utilized, the Y hasn't been operating at capacity, I think that's important information for the community to understand as well. And then the other point is really how do we ensure we have safe school usage while we have our teachers on campus and our staff on campus, as well as bringing these small groups of students in. And the whole point of this is for it to be safe. So can you just give a couple more sentences about some of our precautions to make sure that this is safe for all of our students and all of our staff, both those in the program and those utilizing our limited in-person opportunities?
Yeah. So in the case of private providers, the 3 we've mentioned who are currently licensed to use our buildings, of course, they're required to follow their own programming guidelines, but any agreement for them to use our building comes with the caveat that they must follow all of the facets of our safety and health mitigation plans within their programs. We'll also be very clear about portioning off our buildings so that where they are using buildings, they have very specific access points that don't connect them to the rest of our faculty and staff who may be using the buildings, or places where students may be visiting. And of course, we're looking at our secondary schools in many cases because they're not used as frequently for the in-person larger facilities, that sort of thing. But certainly for any limited in-person with our own students, that involves the transportation piece. So we heard from Mr. Ellis about very strict precautions being used on the bus, students seated every other, the distancing adhered to. We're asking that families screen children before sending them to school. We'll be doing spot checking, health screenings in our buildings, all necessary PPE being used, and really doing it in a careful and strategic manner. And again, you asked about the timeline for pulling some of this off. We know we need to take it one day at a time, one step at a time. So we really understand every building's needs, and administrators will work with the teachers who will be providing this limited in-person support to make sure they have everything they need to do it as they're ready and in the safest manner possible.
Thank you. And then the last question on this piece is, do you anticipate that the usage of our buildings could in any way delay our ability to bring our students back as we work towards having everyone back in the building.
No, I mean, we've made it clear to the providers that, if we were to pivot to, if conditions were allowing us to resume full in-person instruction for our whole student body, then their programs simply wouldn't be able to continue. And we'd, of course, work on providing notice as we made decisions like that. But no, I mean, any use of these buildings has been created in a manner that it doesn't disrupt our ability to do the limited in-person or to have teachers teaching from their classroom, and being able to operate in the plans that we've made and we want to be able to continue with for the first quarter.
Thank you, Dr. Cashwell. That's all for me at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Shea. Ms. Atkins, anything?
So I am super excited to have both of you stand there because I think one of the thoughts that I had when I thought about FACE, family and community engagement, in the past was that it just served a certain population of people. I don't hear that anymore. I don't hear that anymore. That's a huge win. And I think part of that is because of the phenomenal efforts in trying to tackle equity and tackle engagement and recognizing that it should do more of this than this. And I'm super excited to know that and say that confidently to you. And I also want to say that it's been tremendous having the opportunity to talk about some very hard topics. Our community is ready to talk about those topics, and your team built an avenue to do just that. And so it was scary, but needed. And I think that also, in hindsight, offers an opportunity to unite communities. And I think that it is doing that. And so I actually had a charge to ask if they could continue, but you've already addressed that those opportunities for the community to get involved, to talk about hard topics, whether it's around race, hard topics around discrimination, hard topics just about resources. And that was a big part of today, talking about internet. And I think that family and community engagement, getting supplies, your team has done a phenomenal job of just providing a way for people to talk. And it's tremendous. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I know Dr. Mans is sitting in the back there. She's not up here at the front. And I won't ask that she come up here, but I do just want to acknowledge the both of you, because I am looking forward to seeing more and hearing more and expanding upon goals and vision, because where we are right now, it is needed and it's not going away. It is not going away. Now that some of these topics are on the table, they need to continue to be discussed and addressed. Whether the topics around resources and internet or school supplies or anything else. And I know we've had a outreach, a cry from our students. I think it's lovely because they're sharing how they feel, and they are learning that Henrico County is willing to listen. Doesn't mean we're going to do everything and every demand that we receive. That's not what that means. But it means that we have an avenue to allow students and parents, faith-based, regardless of who it is, we have a place where we can listen. And I'm so grateful for that work. Awesome. And that's all I have to say. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Atkins. Ms. Cole-Johnson, quick question. Well, first, before you ask you, Dr. Cashwell, can you speak to the liability? When our partners use an ability, who will be assuming the liability?
It would be their own programming, their own liability. It's just a building use agreement from our perspective, as we would when we have any other outside group use the building.
Thank you so much. Ms. Cole-Johnson, will there be a hotline that parents can call to access resources that they need in this climate, or do they just call your department, or is there a designated hotline, for parents to call?
Yes, we started a hotline right when we got into COVID earlier. So the hope is that we would be extending the hotline, although many people do call our department directly, so we're able to respond either way.
And so for those parents who have a need for the child care day or even later in the evening, do we have a central kind of clearinghouse where do we do referrals, or is just we provide information for them to disseminate themselves?
Right. And so I would say we're at a place of just increasing our awareness. And so we have been collecting information, what partners are doing work, what faith communities are doing work. And so the hope is that we can just be responsive as people are reaching out. Although we're also finding that a lot of the information is decentralized as well. So people are going to trusted resources, trusted entities in the community that they have relationship with. But again, we want to make sure that we're knowledgeable and able to provide that information as well if someone reaches out directly to the school system.
I've had 2 daycare providers ask me, will we as a division be offering training to daycare providers to assist their students during the day? What could you say to that?
Yeah, we actually, just earlier today, we had a meeting with some of our faith partners, and that's been a big ask. And so what does the training look like? How do I access Schoology? How do I understand the school schedule? And so we are planning to have even a half-day training or so that we can support those that are supporting our community.
So is it push-pull channel? Are we reaching out to them, or they have to reach out to us, or we'll just announce it and they can just register for it? How would that work?
It's a little bit of both. I will give a shout out to our community engagement coordinator, Vanisha Johnson. She's really been taking the lead on the effort in our department. And so if someone reaches out to us, I would make sure that they're connected to her, because we are doing a bit of reaching out, but then people are reaching out to us as well.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, well, hearing no other questions about the learning plan, that wraps up a presentation of a number of the big topics that are, of course, covered in our learning plan handbook, and much more covered in here. So I know you'll look forward to reading that. And of course, staff will remain available to the board as needed to answer any questions that may come up related to any details in our learning plan. But we're pleased to be able to launch that.